It's not unusual for students to begin the semester in Writing 121 slightly hostile over having to take this required course. The majority of them are in their first year of college, still trying to settle on a course of study. But also there are a number of 300 to 400 level students who have already taken classes in their field of interest, and they have some experience with college writing. The first group is frightened by the prospect of writing a semester-long research project, and the second group doesn't see the point in taking a 100-level general writing course. As an instructor, I'm left wondering how best to meet the varied needs of all students while also making the classroom seem relevant to them in their lives outside of college and after college, when even I wonder if the research paper is a tired genre that lacks meaning for 21st century students. In order to foster true learning, we need to create meaningful projects that include skills that are transferable, not just to other courses, but to life outside of the academy. With all of the information that is constantly barraging us, the ability to research and think critically about information are still relevant skills. We just need to find a new way to help students see the relevancy. By helping students see research as an intervention into a situation of personal interest, we can help them learn to use research skills while applying those skills to life outside of the academy. Because first-year writing research class is a full semester long, it's imperative that students identify and connect personally with a research area of interest. Initial engagement in a topic is easy to create, but success in a semester-long project requires students be invested in their research in order to maintain interest. But we also must consider the form that our writing takes. Even academic journals are moving to online spaces and digital forums. We can no longer ignore the writing that is happening outside of the academy because research writing itself is changing. Academic writing is expanding its boundaries to reflect writing and composition that takes place outside of the academy. So it's time for our first-year writing pedagogy to match what has been happening outside the academy and is beginning to happen inside as well.
Our world is becoming increasingly multimodal and increasingly digital. More and more writing is happening in digital spaces, and more real-world contexts are requiring more means of productions that are digital in nature. Many more companies are requiring multimedia productions, both in presentations and pitches, and in their final products. They're requiring more digital spaces. We see new jobs emerging every day that involve incorporations of social media, video production, and video editing that written comm and writing studies people can more easily fill. More written comm programs are starting to incorporate these kinds of things into their educational program. And so I think we're doing our students a real disservice by not incorporating it into Writing 121 when there's all this relevant resources and relevant jobs and relevant consequences for them not knowing this when they're entering a job market.
A study in 2016 examined exactly what medium students use to compose and found that 79% of students reported using a word processing program for school assignments, while only 32% of them used the same program for writing that was personally fulfilling, and only 8% of them used word processing to participate in public life. Instead, students use blogs, Facebook, and Twitter for writing that mattered in their personal and public lives. Clearly, writing is happening outside of the academy, but first-year writing is not adequately matching that non-academic writing with our assignments. My suggestion is that the Writing 121 course begins with a focus on personal engagement, moves to writing for intervention in a situation, emphasizes 21st century technology skills through community writing, and returns to a focus on composing for personal fulfillment. Quintilian acknowledged the importance of personal meaning and fulfillment in successful composition when he claimed that for rhetoric to be effective, our first object must be that what we wish to impress upon the judge, we may impress upon ourselves, and that we may be touched ourselves before we begin to touch others. A key component in my course design is that students must be personally engaged in their research before they can begin to convince others, and that research must be composed in meaningful ways that reflect 21st century literacies. So this semester will consist of 3 projects. The first project is an analysis of a discourse community. But it begins with initial identification of interest. In order to do this, I have the students begin with an object exploration assignment. It asks students to explore, question, and utilize Jody Shipka's questions: what is it composed of, and what does it do, with an object that they bring into class that is personally important to them. Students analyze this object, ask questions of it, and they begin to develop research questions that lead into a personal research interest. From this, we move on to the second part of Project 1, which is identification and rhetorical analysis of a discourse community. We begin this by looking at a discourse community as an entire classroom. We identify what a discourse community is, and then we break down all of the rhetorical components of that discourse community. Then students begin for themselves with a What's Your Community assignment, where students search online for a community with which they would like to engage through writing. Students will be engaging with the discourse community for the entire semester. The community needs to reflect their research interest, and it needs to be a community where the student has a voice and is able to participate. Once they've identified this discourse community, the students write a rhetorical analysis paper on the discourse community. Then we move on to Project 2. Project 2 is blogging and writing the research paper. Although they do continue to write a traditional research paper, because that is a skill that is still privileged within academia, within the academy, and students will need those skills to continue on through college. But we try to work through the research process in ways that are more meaningful to students in the 21st century. For this reason, we begin blogging the research process. Students create their own blog. They practice linking to the classroom blog where we are all connected. Every class period, instead of doing fast writes, we do in-class blog prompts where the students are prompted to talk about their discourse community, to talk about where they are in the research process, to talk about what is going on with their research process themselves. We are encouraged to use Wikipedia as research, to look for sources, key terms, and to talk about that on the blog too, what that was like using Wikipedia, because for some students this is the first time they've been allowed to use Wikipedia in their research. The blogs can be used for summarizing research articles and note tracking of sources. We also put the students in affinity groups. Affinity groups are groups of 3 to 4 students that are based upon the student's research interest. Within these groups, the students blog and respond and comment to each other's posts. They also work to help each other develop research, find sources, and peer review each other's drafts. Students are also encouraged to embed video and links into their blog that deal with their research process. After blogging, one student in Writing 121 comment, I also thought that doing a blog helped me because I got a lot of helpful feedback from students and the instructor that gave me a lot of insight on what to do better on some assignments and what to keep doing in the future. So the students see blogging as a worthwhile experience. Additionally, students have to introduce themselves to their discourse community during this project. They're required to have weekly interactions with the discourse community where they're either asking for information about their research interest or they're sharing information with the discourse community. One student in particular found a discourse community on cosplay, and she realized that she could perform an intervention in this community by talking about cosplay in terms of self-esteem. This allowed for a real-world audience for her research, and it allowed her to perform an intervention and make a difference in the discourse community. Once the research projects are completed, the students move on to Project 3. Project 3 is a multimodal transformation, but there are actually 2 parts to this multimodal transformation. One is a digital transformation of their research project, and the second is a 3-dimensional transformation of their research project. After students have completed their research paper, they will transform their research findings into a digital project. Some examples of this could be a video, a website, a digital collage, a Prezi, etc. The purpose of this is to write in and work with genres frequently used outside of the academy. Students will find online examples of their digital projects and rhetorically analyze these projects in their blogs and in their affinity groups. After blogging proposals, groups will offer feedback and suggestions. The final projects will be posted to the blogs and can be shared with discourse communities as well. From there, students move on to the final project, which is the three-dimensional transformation of the research paper. This is returning back to the personal aspect of research. The course began with students analyzing an object of personal importance to them. This object led students to develop research questions as well as questions about the composition of the object. Returning to the original idea that research must be personally engaging and relevant to the individual student, the final transformation of research reflects this personal component. As Jody Shipka's work makes clear to us, composition does not always consist of words in a row. Instead, this three-dimensional project represents the personal research work done over the course of the semester. While the written research shared digitally allows the students to make an intervention into a situation, the final composed object, a three-dimensional project, reflects the more personal engagement students make with their own research.
Now we're moving into Unit 3, which is kind of centered around the idea of craftivism and this idea that we can build multimodal crafts that make visual arguments in fun and interesting and dynamic ways. And for many students, there was a little bit of hesitation. They weren't quite sure what it was about because they've never looked at multimodal composition as a way of writing. And so we've been having a lot of conversations about how this multimodal craft is meant to invite conversation. It's meant to have people see it and interact with it and pose questions and think about this issue in maybe ways that they hadn't already thought about. And so my hope for this project, and it's the first time that I've tried it this way, so we'll see how it all works out. But my hope is that students will walk away from this project recognizing the value in real audiences, recognizing the value in academic conversations, and not only looking at where those conversations originated and what's been happening in those conversations, which is the research that they did, but also how can they contribute to that conversation by, if not writing a paper that's research-oriented, building something, designing something that can engage audiences in ways that maybe the traditional research paper can't.
Completing our multimodal transformation has been my favorite project we completed. Although I'm not a huge fan of arts and crafts, I am impressed with myself that I was able to transform my research paper into a 3D project that meets the rhetorical concerns of audience, ethos, pathos, logos, kairos, and our course outcomes.
As I reflect on why I dreaded teaching the first year writing research paper, I think it is because of its narrow scope as simply an academic project with no standing in the real world. We know that researching and locating information is important outside of the academy. I want my students to have the skills and desire to find information for themselves in their lives outside of school, but I also want them to see the importance and value of sharing their own writing and research. Increasingly, I am becoming convinced that blogging and online writing create meaningful real-world writing within first-year writing courses. When students self-select a topic, a community, and then engage with that online community by sharing their own research and responding to community members, they are composing authentic real-world writing. I'm not sure I can ask for more than that in a 16-week course.